So rarely do I get called distinguished or gentleman, and even less frequently in the same sentence, which is why when my buddy Rob called and told me that he wanted me to go on a distinguished gentleman's ride, motorcycles, from Red Oak to Council Bluffs and a little bit of Omaha, tour of Omaha, I decided I'm gonna say yes, because how often is that gonna ever happen again? So the cool thing about Rob, many of you may or may not remember, years ago, he was my Tuk Tuk mechanic. Oh, sirens aren't a good sign. And he's always been telling me crazy stories about meeting Charles Manson and his dad working for Howard Hughes and all kinds of stuff. So I'm hoping to squeeze some stories out of him on the way over, because he may be the most interesting man that I know. So hold tight. Hopefully we can dodge the storms today and have a little fun. Come on. What are we looking at here, Rob? You said these are 1920s era?
1919, I believe, was the year that he started at the machine shop.
These were your dad's?
Grandfather.
No, this is
Irving Isaac Woodard.
This is not the same guy who was the airline pilot for, or I mean the mechanic for, who was it? Howard Hughes?
No, that's my step-grandfather.
Step-grandfather.
That's my grandfather.
So these are these guy. This guy up here.
Yep.
These are his glasses. These are pretty cool. You want to try one, Kitty? Is this handmade?
Yes.
Who made it?
I have no idea.
That is super cool.
I have every suspicion it's the same person that did this one.
Where'd you get it?
Swap meet over in Nebraska City.
Wow, that is super cool.
The alligator skin paint.
Yeah.
Traded that directly for the Enfield. I have developed Parkinson's disease and my hands are acting up. So the Sportster with the hot rod motor kept lifting the front wheel in the air.
Yeah.
When I was playing Michael J. Fox. Anyway. I traded the Sportster for that one.
Yeah.
And that big blue Road King I had.
Yeah.
I traded it for the urinal. My friend renamed it. It's now the urinal.
What is it technically?
Ural. U-R-A-L.
Got it. And that is a Russian model? Or is that what?
1939, Adolf Hitler, trying to keep peace with Stalin.
Yeah.
Granted the Russians permission to produce these and sent all the machinery and tooling over to Russia.
Okay.
As a freebie.
Huh.
Well, 2 years later, he broke that agreement and attacked Russia anyway.
Weird.
Russia continued producing those. Till now, they're still in business. And they gifted the design to the Chinese, who are now also producing it under the name Changjiang. And they're actually very fine machines built on some of the original 1939 tooling. So you can take a piston from that vintage BMW and it fits the Ural.
Oh, wow.
Rugged, dependable. Chinese have piled 4 or 5 people on board these things and driven to hell and back just because the prospect of carrying your family inexpensively is a big thing in China.
Mm-hmm. So
Late
why?
1940s, Indian chose Royal Enfield to produce their lightweight motorcycles.
Okay.
Harley purchased the company Armaki to do that for them. Indian chose Enfield, and they made their lightweight stuff. In the Indian lineup, this exact bike, and the parts interchange way back to then,
Okay.
was called the Indian Woodsman. And 54, Indian goes out of business.
Mm-hmm.
And Royal Enfield takes over production of all Indians to fill their dealerships because they didn't want to screw over their dealerships. So there was a 700cc Indian Chief produced by Enfield and a whole product line of smaller bikes. And same thing goes, this was the Indian Woodsman. Now the forks are the same, the frame's the same, the tank's the same, seating's the same, frame's the same, wheels are the same. 75 years had passed. They added a disc brake in the front, electronic ignition, and a fuel injector. Other than that, all the parts interchanged back to 54.
And what vintage is this one right here that we're looking at?
This is a 2009.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I've seen some Indian shops driving down the highways across the country. But so they came back in production in what year?
I'm deaf.
Oh, yeah, they came back. When did they come back in production again?
Well, it's a different company.
Yeah.
Several companies have tried to produce them unsuccessfully. And the big company, Polaris, bought rights to the name and began production, 8 years ago.
Same people who make like the Polaris.
Yep.
Yep. Cool.
Iowa company.
So, you've told me all kinds of stories, but tell me the story about growing up in California. Tell me the Manson story with the Manson family.
Okay. My father was military. His last duty posting was California, so we settled there. He started an aviation insurance company. Thousand Oaks did not have an airport, so we used the Santa Susana Airport in Simi Valley, California, where Reagan and Lucas McCain from the Riflemen, Bob Hope had property there. They filmed The Big Valley right in that area, the TV show with Barbara Stanwyck. A neat place to be a child. The airport, now my dad, in order to get to work in Van Nuys, California, drove from Thousand Oaks to Simi, got in his airplane, flew over the ranch, and down to Van Nuys where he worked. And just the best of childhoods, because I grew up in the aviation community. Great deal of fun. Well, my dad was an airplane enthusiast to an incredible degree. And we spent weekends at the airport. And right up the hill from the airport is the Spawn Movie Ranch, where Charles Manson and the family lived. Well, all the girls that hung out there, some of them had kids our age, and they'd come down the hill, or we'd go up and we'd play cowboys and Indians or soldiers or whatever was in the theme for that day. And at the end of the day, Charlie had walked down to fetch the kids for dinner. We had no idea who the hell he was. He was nice enough.
So you actually met Charles Manson, or you saw him at least?
Probably 30 times.
Wow. So, I mean, what are your memories of him?
In a time when everyone had a crew cut,
Yeah.
he had great big long hair and a beard.
Okay. So
That's pretty much, we didn't get into, I was 9, 10.
yeah.
We didn't get into any in-depth conversations. But
Is that where you got your fashion choices from?
No.
No.
Anyway, he eventually moved off, and so did we. We moved to Texas from there. And in Texas in 1972, we're watching the news coverage of the Tate and LaBianca murders.
Yeah.
And then they're showing pictures of Charlie. My dad, the Marine Corps colonel, just absolutely freaked, knowing that his children, me and my brother, were playing with the mass murderers' adoptive children.
Oh my.
It wasn't good.
Yeah, I
He
bet.
didn't like that.
That is wild. Now, you also told me, speaking of it, you said that you lived Ronald Reagan. You told me a story about...
Ronald Reagan is also from Simi Valley, California. And his favorite vehicle was an old Jeep CJ2 from right after World War II. No top, just a bare bones Jeep with a little 4-cylinder and 2 gear shifts. And that's his favorite vehicle of all time. Anyway, he used to carry in the passenger seat a 12-gauge double-barrel shotgun loaded with rock salt. The reason he had that is kind of me and my friends who rode dirt bikes on his property. He didn't like that. Well, 1983, I'm wounded in action over in Beirut, Lebanon. And they sent the bodies and those of us that survived it home in a C-141 Starlifter, I believe it was. I could be wrong. Big-ass silver plane. Lots of aluminum coffins. They flew us from Tel Aviv over to Dover Air Force Base, which is where they take the incoming dead. And they clean them up, redress them. And then those of us who survived were transferred to Bethesda Naval Hospital. Ron and Nancy came to visit us there. And then when Ron got up to visiting me in my bed, I reminded him I was one of those little monster kids. And that's when he told me about the 12-gauge double barrel he had for us with the rock salt. Anyway, we became friends, and we, over the years before he developed such severe Alzheimer's, we gossiped, conversed. Mm-hmm. Didn't get to hang out with him because he was in California and I was here, but good guy. I liked Ron.
Yeah.
Nancy was a total nutbag.
What makes you say that?
Oh, she was.
Yeah.
She believed in psychics, all sorts of strange offbeat things that kind of made you kind of tilt your head and, okay, Nancy.
So you mentioned something there, the Beirut bombing. That is an incredible story. You are lucky to be here today. What happened, and what do you remember of that?
1983, Israel was withdrawing from Lebanon. They were occupying it at the time. That was their Vietnam. The public did not support them being there. And after much to do, they decided to pull out. Well, they were having problems pulling out without committing more war because the Syrians were attacking them almost daily. So they want to get their troops out, but they can't. So the United Nations came to their aid and formed the United Nations Peacekeeping Force, comprised of Italians, French, and the U.S. Marines. We were sent over there to provide a buffer zone to keep the Palestinians, the other people that were attacking. It wasn't just Palestinians, there were Egyptians and all the different Arab countries. Anyway, we were a buffer zone. We did a full-on amphibious assault, just like Normandy. Only there wasn't anybody shooting at us. No one even came to film it. We did all the LSTs with the doors dropping and the troops running out. My unit was a Hawk missile unit, and we were to provide air defense above the area that we were invading. So we set up our Hawk missile unit over by the airport. And once our radars started emitting, the Syrians wouldn't fly over anymore because they didn't want to die. Anyway, it was much to do about nothing. We were still getting attacked a little bit, not bad. I managed to catch a ricochet, and it went up into the corner of my eye. And they put me on light duty while the stitches were growing over. It's a dusty environment. You don't want to have open wounds there. Anyway, they took me away from the airport and put me in the Marine barracks. And nothing to do there, so my job for that short period of time when I was on light duty was I was sergeant of the guard. And in the evenings, I'd stay up all night, and any deliveries that are made, I'd sign for them. And just all the duties of sergeant of the guard. We were armed. The rules of engagement forbade us from carrying ammunition in our weapons. So I have an M16 and a magazine. The magazine's not in it. It's in the pocket. When I'm behind the desk, I have a Colt 45 1911 A1, but the magazine's out of it and it's in the pocket. Anyway, one evening, real late, you have to go out. They don't like smoking in their buildings. They consider it a dirty habit. And I had to go outside to smoke. Got towards the end of my shift, probably, I don't even remember, I think it was around 6:30 or 7. I went outside to have a cigarette. And the building's like this, the front's here. I went out the back to smoke, and they drove the truck bomb into the building, killing 241 mainly Marines, a few Navy personnel, and then no one's ever talked about the floor above us where they had the guys with black suits and dark sunglasses. We don't know how many of them died. They never publicized it. It was a forbidden topic. But
What do you remember? Like, you're sitting there smoking and then you just hear a boom, or what?
I remember waking up, I don't know, 80 feet away from where I was, and I had the wall that I was leaning against on top of me, so I'm trying to push cinder blocks off of me. And the people that did that were the Egyptian Liberation Front. Later they changed their name to Al-Qaeda. And Osama was a member of that event. He was a young lieutenant in that organization at the time. But bad things. We weren't there to commit the act of war. We were just there to keep the peace while Israel withdrew. There really wasn't any reason to attack us other than the fact that they were against the West at that point.
So you mentioned being on the Hawk missile team.
Before I get there, one last point.
Yeah.
Everyone says, why? We weren't attacking you. Why did you attack us? We've been in those people's business since the First and Second Crusades. They have every reason to hate us.
Yeah.
We don't belong in their business. We never have belonged in their business. Okay, go on.
Yeah. You mentioned the Hawk missile program. You had told me at one point in time, speaking of missiles, we had talked about the Iran-Contra affair, and you mentioned that you had known or at least met Oliver North. Tell me about that.
My commanding officer was best buddy. Now, he was an amazing person. He is what technically is called a maverick. He started out enlisted, did his time, went officer, completed officer candidate school, went into the officer ranks, and went to the pay grade of major. His best friend was a young captain named Oliver North. And I got to meet Ollie at BBQs and softball games, and he would stop down at, now you have bars on post. You have one for the officers and one for the enlisted. And Ollie was a very sociable guy. He'd stop down to the enlisted bar and hang out with his troops. So would Captain Carver, or Major Carver at this point. But real nice guy.
What was that?
And then being in the Hawk missiles, that's how I ended up over in Beirut providing air defense for the Israeli withdrawal.
So you had met Ollie when back home stateside,
Yeah.
when you were stationed where?
Yuma, Arizona, with the 2nd Light Anti-Aircraft Missile Battalion.
What business did he have in Yuma?
He was friends with Carver, and then I don't know what his duty posting was.
Gotcha. Very interesting. But your general take of him. So how did you feel like when everything was happening in the 80s with the whole investigation into Iran-Contra? What was the general feeling that you
Well,
and
I
others...
knew 2 of the key characters. I knew Ron Reagan, and later I knew Ron Reagan. About a year later, I knew Ron Reagan. And I knew who Reagan was. I knew that he was from my area. I had ridden my motorcycle on his property, so I sort of kind of almost knew Reagan. And I had met later Colonel North a few years later, and wonderful guy. And it was just strange because U.S. Marine lieutenant colonels do not make national policy.
Right.
They don't decide who buys and sells anything. That's generals and presidents. North is just the person that the generals sent to conduct their business. And the whole fact that they were pinning everything on him, the general above him who actually issued the orders was quietly retired. But they put North in prison.
So you saw him as being
carrying out the orders he was issued.
Got it. So from your perspective, you saw him as being a scapegoat.
Yep.
For a lot of this stuff.
He most certainly was. He did not deserve what he got.
As someone who actually was in Beirut, and like you said, we didn't feel that we had any interest in meddling in their business. How do you feel generally about knowledge, like what was going on in like Nicaragua and us being down there and funding the Sandinistas, and in light of that whole non-monkeying with other people's business thing?
We live in a country that was founded on the concept of freedom. And I did not know a great deal on that topic concerning the Contra whatever details. I had no knowledge. I didn't actually have an opinion about that. You have to have a certain base of information before you form an idea, and I had no idea. So
you and the rest of us.
Kind of a non-event. I didn't know anything about it, and that's what I knew was nothing.
Last thing, you tell me about, you mentioned your dad and being a pilot. Tell me about Howard Hughes and tell me about the air shows.
Well, my dad opened an aviation insurance company designed for the little guy, like you and me with our little bitty airplanes. And second year in business, they were the second largest general aviation firm on earth because they catered to a small percentage. We got everybody's business. He began, for advertising purposes, doing very strange ads in magazines, the aviation periodicals. And he'd have like a zebra and then have his company logo, Omni, a horse of a whole different color. I mean, he was a very interesting person. He sponsored people in the air races. And the most exciting sport on earth is going 350 to 450 miles an hour, 25 feet off the desert floor. I mean, there's nothing, it makes NASCAR pale in comparison. And then the people who were doing this were the innovators in aviation, so it was a learning process for everybody involved. Have you ever seen that great big airplane called the Guppy, that the ass end folds over and you can put a Saturn V in this
like
and
a rocket?
close it back up and carry it?
Oh, no.
Anyway, that was one of the people involved. He designed the Super Guppy. Clay Lacy did 95 to 98% of everything you've ever seen in the movies and advertising concerning airplanes. The TV series Airwolf, Black Sheep Squadron, The list just goes. I just saw his hangar featured. I was watching reruns of the Sons of Anarchy. And there they are in Clay's hangar with Clay's airplanes behind him for props. Anyway, the little World War II fighters passing by at 400, you couldn't see a sponsorship logo. My dad had to brainstorm, well, I'll fly something bigger that you can read it. So from one of those interesting people who knew Clay Lacy, they rented/borrowed a DC-7 4-engine airliner, last of the piston-powered propeller airliners that would do 400. And in letters 8 foot tall, he painted his company logo down the side. And they never had any intention of winning or even placing highly in this 1,000-mile race. But he knew he'd get good press out of it, so it was worth every cent. And they raced that 4-engine airliner 50 feet off the deck at almost 400 miles an hour, doing the high bank ovals around the pylons. And he got his company logo out in front of everybody, and everybody got to read the logo. So advertising-wise, finally air racing paid off. But it took some creative thinking. Oddly enough, Beirut, we were at the airport. That's where we set up the Hawk unit, and we established where we were going to shoot, process called cutouts, and all aimed over toward Syria. At the airport, that DC-7 that we flew in 1970 in the air race, in 1983 it was sitting at the Beirut airport with all the engines removed.
What are the chances? Why?
They wore out the engines, sold them to be rebuilt, and they just left the airframe sitting there.
As far as you know, it's still there.
As far as I know.
Is this the same plane that you showed me the picture of? I don't know if it was called the human ant or something, of a guy standing on top of the plane while it was flying?
Clay was United Airlines pilot seniority #1. All of the pilots answered to him. And that airplane you're describing was a Convair. I don't know if it was a 660 or 880. But they built a little framework so he wouldn't get blown off, and he just went up there and stood.
Oh, that was Clay standing on there?
No. Clay flew the airplane.
Gotcha,
the guy who was the human ant stood on top of it. But they had to do a little bit of modification before they did it.
So how did your stepfather end up connected to Howard Hughes?
That was my real dad.
Your real dad, okay.
Anyway, my real dad's FAA inspector and friend was a gentleman named Doherty. And Doherty is the one who always gave Howard his check rides to keep his pilot's license current and legal. One day, Doherty swings by the house and he hollered at my dad, "Hey, I got to give Howard his check ride. You want to come along and watch?" So we both hopped in the car and went out to the Van Nuys Airport. Howard had a somewhat big 2-engine airplane, last of his planes that he kept just for his personal convenience. Anyway, I got to see Doherty get out of the car, walk over to the airplane. I got to see 2 guys in dark suits open up the limo and help Howard out. Howard and Doherty walked over to the airplane, went flying for about an hour and 15 minutes, and then got to watch him walk out of the airplane.
You may be the only person, one of few people alive, who has both met Charles Manson, seen Howard Hughes, Reagan.
The area. Southern California at that time was an amazing place.
Yeah.
It really was. The Big Valley, 5-star studios in Thousand Oaks. All of us little kids would ride our Stingrays over to the front gate of that movie studio so we could see, what's Heath's name? Later, he was the Lee Majors.
Oh, yeah, the Fall Guy.
We'd see Lee Majors go through. We'd see Barbara Stanwyck go through. The very lovely young actress who played the sister of Heath's, watched her go through, and just, I don't know, the grocery store we went to, Howard Brennan, Walter Brennan, John Wayne's friend and fellow actor, that's the grocery store he went to. And when he showed up at the store and there were little kids present, he bought us all candy because he was just a sweetheart of a guy.
Oh, man. That does sound like a magical time. That's really cool.
It was amazing. At that time, California wasn't liberal. And basically, it was all desert. We could walk out our back door in Thousand Oaks, go through a little drainage gully, and then it was open fields and cactus and wildlife, and we could shoot our rifles and try to hit rabbits and miss, and it was an amazing childhood.
Man, that's really cool. Well, it's kind of clearing up. Almost ready to go for a ride?
Yeah, let's wipe the bike down so it doesn't appear terrible when we get there, and let's go overindulge.
Sounds good.
We'll have the fastest bike at the event.
Yeah.
I'm serious, really. This is what. Oh, oops. This is why.
I have no idea what I'm looking at here.
That's a Janus 250, handmade in Goshen, Indiana.
Really? I grew up not far from Goshen,
Okay.
Indiana.
Where at?
Little small town called Warsaw
Okay.
in Kosciuszko County.
Okay. I sleep in Mishawaka 2 nights a week. So.
My niece actually got married in Mishawaka.
Okay.
Yeah. Is this so? Is Janus a
Manufacturer.
really? Is
Yep.
it an older brand of bike? Or
No,
is
no, no.
it-
They're still making them today. They've
Still make
made
them?
less than about 1,100 of these so far to date.
Is this a newer one or is it?
2020.
Okay. How?
It's a serial number 540.
Oh wow, that is really pretty. Did you ride it all the way from Indiana?
No, I live just like 2 blocks south of here. I bought this. This popped up for sale locally used, and I'm the second owner of it.
What else? What we got next here? Triumph.
Customized Triumph.
Yeah. She's pretty. Oh, we got a nice
He
one.
added the Cafe Racer style tailpiece, I believe.
Cool.
This is the gentleman. Don't you have the 350? No, you have
Serious?
the 750.
Yes, sir.
Oh man, that is pretty.
Thank you.
Did you
Do
restore
you
that?
know Mark Hunter? Mark's the former service manager back when there was a Nebraska motorcycle.
Just real quick in a minute. Go and hit the bathroom if you need to. It looks like weather's gonna maybe hit at the end of our ride, so we probably want to leave as quickly as we can get that speech over. So, the quick version of this ride speech, I'm going quick because the weather now shows that it might be hitting around Baxter cycle around 3. So now instead of giving us till about 6 p.m. of mostly not wet, we might be hitting it. If we're in the middle of this ride and it starts downpouring and we're still going towards downtown, we might just divert it and kind of go straight out there. We're gonna ride politely. The whole idea is that we're doing a slow parade throughout town. People see us dressed nicely going, oh my gosh, what is that? And then they learn about our cause. They go to gentleman'sride.com and they learn that we're raising money and funds for research for prostate cancer research and male suicide prevention. That's our goal. So that's why we do things politely. We're not, riding wheelies and anything else. Of course, it's raining, so we're not doing stupid anyway. We want to stay a nice, safe ride.
Well, Rob, here goes nothing.
Yep.
Real beautiful Road King.
Yeah.
Belonged to my former boss who's passed away. Anyway, he was the commander of the National Guard unit, reserves, whichever it is, in Red Oak. And he got out of the service. Joni Ernst took over for him. He owns the John Deere dealerships in Avoca and Oakland. Anyway, I bought this bike from him. While he was commander of the National Guard, his chief of maintenance, his non-com, was Randy Baxter, these dealerships. So I've known Randy for like 46, 48 years.
Is anybody you don't know, Rob? Anybody you don't know?
Been around a long time.
Yeah.
Then Randy's just one of the true sweethearts in this world.
Yeah.
Very kind gentleman. Sunday, a group of us are out riding. Young lady with a Triumph that she bought it from Randy. We're passing his place on a Sunday. He's out in front of his house mowing the grass. He stopped mowing. Her battery was dead and we're having to bump start her bike. On a Sunday, he quit mowing, opened the shop, installed a battery in her bike, and then obviously no cash register on a Sunday. He told, well, next time you're by, just go ahead and pay for it.
That's a pretty good commercial right there.
That's Randy Baxter.
Going down the line. Tell me a story about this bar over here. Tell me that story again about that bar.
An acquaintance of mine asked the bartender to watch his wallet, trucker wallet, great big thing, can't miss it. Went to the restroom, came out, his wallet was gone. Asked the bartender about it. The bartender just shrugged. He went out, got in his semi, and drove in and asked him the same thing again.
That's why this...
He never mentioned it, but I bet you he didn't just shrug that time.
Oh my gosh. Oh man. Seems to be the problem, Rob.
10 miles that way and that direction.
Yeah.
We might be able to go in behind that storm and over. But I think if we continue as we're going,
Yeah.
we got to go right underneath that thing. What's your impression?
I'm colorblind, so I can't really tell.
Oh, colors don't matter, just light and dark.
Light and dark. Well, it's definitely a little bit lighter to the left. I don't think it looks all that bad over there. It's like they say in Caddyshack, I don't think the real heavy stuff's coming down for quite some time now.
Well, we'll try it. Worst that can happen is we get wet.
True. not have been good being caught in that stuff.
No,
We
no, we made it home.
We
just
dodged a
in
bullet.
time.
All right, Rob.
That's moving really quickly. Good to see you, folks.
Appreciate all the stories, man. This has been a great time.
Well, it was a great pleasure to have you come visit.
Same bat time, same bat channel.
Yeah.
Next year?
Sure.
All right.
Either
Sounds
that
good.
or we'll do the one up in Des Moines.
I didn't even know there was one in Des
There
Moines.
is one in Des Moines.
All right. We might have to do that one. Tuk Tuks next year? But okay.
I have the ability. I'd like to
I gotta-
see you get the Vespa going in that period of time.
Now there's a goal. There's a goal. So, all right, brother. Good stuff. Thanks so much. Whoa,
Proceed on I-80 East.
that was wild. They talk about riding the storm out. That was wild, though. That was literally like right on the cusp of a monster. But hopefully, we made it. We made it. Clear sailing home. We make good time. See ya.